My name is Emma Carter, and this is the story of how my millionaire boss tried to steal my husband, only to discover that money can buy almost anything except genuine love. People assume a blue-collar man will leave the moment a rich woman shows him attention. My boss believed that too. She had the money, the designer clothes, the luxury penthouse, and enough confidence to think every person had a price. What she didn't understand was that my husband had already chosen his treasure years before he ever met her. I worked as an executive assistant for Victoria Sinclair, the CEO of Sinclair Holdings. She was only 42, but had already built a business empire worth hundreds of millions. Every magazine called her brilliant. Every business podcast praised her confidence. Every employee feared walking into her office. She demanded perfection, and if she didn't get it, she'd humiliate you in front of everyone without thinking twice. Meanwhile, my husband Jake spent his days repairing power lines. His hands were rough from years of honest work. His truck had over 200,000 miles on it, and he'd rather spend a Saturday fixing our porch than sitting in a luxury restaurant. We weren't rich, but we laughed every day. We cooked dinner together, argued over what movie to watch, and danced in the kitchen when our favorite songs came on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Everything changed the afternoon Victoria unexpectedly stopped by my desk. She had seen the framed photo of Jake that I'd kept beside my computer for years. She picked it up, studied it for a few seconds, and smiled. "So that's your husband?" I nodded proudly. "He's handsome." I smiled politely. "He is." She kept looking at the picture a little longer than she should have before setting it back down. "You married well." Something about the way she said it made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. I had bigger things to worry about than my boss complimenting my husband. A week later, the company held its annual charity gala. Employees were encouraged to bring their spouses. It was the first corporate event Jake had ever attended. He wasn't excited about wearing a tuxedo, and he joked that he'd probably be the only man there whose job involved climbing electrical poles instead of climbing corporate ladders. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, expensive champagne, and people discussing investments I couldn't even pronounce. Jake looked completely out of place in his rented tuxedo, yet somehow he still managed to look more confident than half the executives in the room. When Victoria arrived, the entire room seemed to shift toward her. Cameras flashed. Investors rushed over to greet her. She spotted us almost immediately. She walked straight toward Jake. Not me. Jake. She introduced herself with an unusually warm smile I'd never seen her give anyone else. Within minutes, she was laughing at his jokes, asking about his work, and completely ignoring me. I told myself I was imagining things. Then she asked him to dance, right in front of me. The room fell strangely quiet. Jake looked at me before answering. Then he smiled politely. "I'm sorry. I only dance with my wife." A few people nearby smiled. Victoria didn't. Her expression froze for just a second before she laughed, as though nothing had happened. "Oh, how sweet." But I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't used to hearing no. The following Monday, everything changed. Victoria suddenly started giving me impossible deadlines. She criticized reports she'd previously approved. She questioned every email I sent. She found mistakes that didn't exist. Then, during a department meeting with nearly 50 employees present, she stopped in the middle of a presentation and looked directly at me. "Emma, perhaps if you spent less time worrying about your husband and more time doing your job, you wouldn't be making so many mistakes." The conference room went silent. I hadn't made a single mistake. Everyone knew it. But nobody said a word. I felt my face burning with embarrassment, while Victoria calmly continued the meeting, as though she'd done nothing wrong. That was the moment I realized. This had never been about my work. It had become personal. The humiliation didn't end there. It became part of my daily routine. Every morning, Victoria found a new way to remind everyone that I worked for her. If I arrived 5 minutes early, she'd ask why I wasn't 10. If I stayed late, She'd ask why the work hadn't been finished sooner. If another department made a mistake, somehow it became my responsibility. People noticed. Nobody intervened. When your paycheck depends on one person, courage becomes expensive. At home, I tried to hide it from Jake. I'd force a smile before walking through the front door, but he always knew. "You had another bad day?" "It's nothing." He gently took my hands. "Emma, you don't have to protect me from your pain." I finally broke down. I told him everything. The public insults, the impossible workload, the comments, the way Victoria looked at him during the gala. Jake's expression changed. "She asked me out." I froze. "What?" "After the gala." My heart stopped. "She found me in the parking lot." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What did she say?" Jake leaned back in his chair and sighed. "She said a man like me deserved a better life." He laughed bitterly. "She asked how much money I'd need to walk away from my marriage." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "She offered to buy you?" He nodded. I thought she was joking. And when I realized she wasn't, "What did you say?" Jake reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I told her my wife wasn't something I traded." Tears filled my eyes. He smiled. "Then she told me every man has a price." I whispered, "And?" "I told her mine was impossible to afford." For the first time all week I laughed, not because it was funny, because hearing those words reminded me why I'd married him. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Victoria wasn't embarrassed. She became obsessed. Flowers started arriving at Jake's job. Expensive watches were delivered to our house. Luxury vacation brochures appeared in our mailbox. Even a brand new pickup truck was dropped off outside our home one Saturday morning with a ribbon tied across the hood. Jake looked at it for about 5 seconds. Then he called the dealership. "You delivered this to the wrong address." The salesman smiled awkwardly. "Actually, sir, Miss Sinclair purchased it for you." Jake handed him the keys. "Take it back." "I already own my dream truck." The salesman looked confused. Jake pointed toward his old work truck sitting in the driveway. The faded paint, the dented bumper, the rust around the wheel well. "That one got me through 20 years of honest work. I'm keeping it." By Monday morning, Victoria was furious. She stormed into my office without knocking. "What exactly have you been telling your husband about me?" I stood up. "Nothing." "Don't lie." "I'm not." She stepped closer. "No man refuses me 3 times." I looked her directly in the eyes. "Maybe he just loves his wife." The silence that followed was ice cold. Her smile disappeared. "You know what your problem is, Emma?" "No." "You think love matters." She leaned across my desk. "Love disappears. Money doesn't." I quietly answered, "Then why are you trying so hard to buy someone who already has love?" For the first time since I'd known Victoria, she had no response. She simply stared at me, but the look in her eyes told me something terrifying. She wasn't planning to give up. She was planning to win. Victoria's next move was something I never saw coming. She stopped trying to impress Jake. Instead, she decided to destroy me. 2 days later, I was called into the boardroom. Every department head was there. Human resources, the finance director, our legal counsel, even the chairman had flown in for the meeting. Victoria stood at the front with a folder in her hands. She looked almost pleased. "Emma," she said, "we've uncovered evidence that confidential company information has been leaving this office." My stomach dropped. "What?" She opened the folder and slid several printed emails across the table. My name was on every one of them: internal reports, financial projections, private client information. It looked like I'd been leaking company secrets. I stared at the papers. "I've never seen these." Victoria folded her arms. "That's interesting." Because they were sent from your account. I looked around the room. No one believed me, or worse, no one wanted to disagree with Victoria. By the end of the meeting, I was escorted back to my office while security waited outside the door. I packed 34 years of photographs, notebooks, coffee mugs, and little pieces of my life into a cardboard box. Not one coworker looked me in the eye. As the elevator doors closed, I realized Victoria had finally found a way to separate me from Jake. If I had no job, no income, no confidence, maybe I'd become exactly the woman she thought I'd be, someone easy to replace. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the termination letter. Jake quietly read every page. Then he looked at me. "Did you do this?" I almost laughed. After everything that had happened. He still asked, not because he doubted me, because he wanted to hear me say it. "No." He folded the papers. "I know. You didn't even hesitate. I've known you for 15 years. I know exactly who you are." Then he stood up, grabbed his truck keys, and headed toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To return something." "What?" He smiled. "The last gift your boss sent me." The next morning, Jake walked into Sinclair Holdings, carrying a small black velvet box. Reception immediately called Victoria. She invited him upstairs with a smile, convinced he'd finally changed his mind. When he entered her office, she stood and walked toward him. "I knew you'd come around." Jake placed the velvet box on her desk. She opened it. Inside was the expensive watch she'd mailed to him the week before. "I don't want it." She looked surprised. "You don't like the brand?" Jake smiled politely. "I don't like the reason you bought it." Victoria leaned against her desk. "Your wife can't give you the life I can." Jake nodded. "You're right." For just a second, Victoria smiled. Then Jake continued. "She gave me something money never will." "And what's that?" "A reason to come home every night." The smile disappeared. Jake looked around the enormous office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, original artwork, luxury furniture, a view worth millions. Then he quietly said, "You have everything, except the one thing you're trying to buy." He turned around and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped without looking back. "Oh, one more thing. My wife may have lost her job, but you lost something much bigger." Victoria frowned. "What?" "The chance to be someone worth loving." The office door closed behind him. For the first time in years, Victoria Sinclair was left standing alone in complete silence. Jake had barely driven out of the parking garage when Victoria did something no one expected. She doubled down. By lunchtime, an email was sent to every employee in the company. "Emma Carter has been terminated for gross misconduct and breach of company trust, effective immediately." No details, no evidence, just enough to destroy my reputation. Within hours, friends I'd worked beside for years stopped answering my messages. Recruiters canceled interviews the moment they heard where I'd worked. Even people who had once thanked me for helping them suddenly acted as though they had never known me. Victoria hadn't just taken my job. She had made sure no one else would give me one. For the first time in our marriage, I looked at Jake and said the words I never thought I'd say. "I think she won." He reached over and took my hand. "No. She's just louder." 3 weeks later, I was still unemployed. Every application ended the same way. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Our needs have changed. We're looking for someone with a different background." Nobody said it directly, but everyone had heard the rumors. One evening, while I was deleting yet another rejection email, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" A calm voice answered. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes?" "My name is Daniel Foster. I'm the chairman of Sinclair Holdings." I nearly dropped the phone. "I've been trying to reach you." My heart started racing. If this is about the accusations, it isn't. I'd like to meet you. The next morning, I walked into a quiet cafe downtown. Daniel was already waiting. He was nothing like Victoria. No designer suit, no bodyguards, just an older man with a notebook and a cup of black coffee. He stood to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming." "I'll be honest," I said. "I'm not sure why I'm here." He slid a folder across the table. "I reviewed the investigation myself." I frowned. "What investigation?" "The one Victoria never expected anyone else to read." Inside the folder were computer logs, security reports, building access records, email login histories. Daniel tapped one page. "The confidential emails weren't sent from your computer." I stared at him. "They weren't?" "No. They were scheduled remotely from an executive administrator account." He paused. "With Victoria's authorization." I looked at him in disbelief. "She framed me?" He nodded. "And she made one critical mistake." I could barely breathe. "What mistake?" "She assumed no one above her would ever ask questions." Daniel leaned back. "Unfortunately for her, I always ask questions." 2 days later, every employee at Sinclair Holdings received another company-wide email. This one was much shorter. "Victoria Sinclair has been placed on immediate administrative leave, pending an internal investigation." By the afternoon, the story had spread through every department. People who had ignored my messages suddenly started calling. Former coworkers apologized. Some admitted they'd never believed the accusations. Others admitted they had, because they were afraid not to. I appreciated the apologies, but something inside me had changed. I didn't need everyone to believe me anymore. The only people whose trust mattered already had, Jake's and my own. A week later, Daniel invited me back to the company's headquarters. As I stepped off the elevator, every eye turned toward me. The same hallway where I'd carried a cardboard box out in tears now felt completely different. Daniel smiled. "I have 2 offers." I looked at him. "First, we'd like to reinstate your position." I was silent. "And second." He slid another folder across the desk. "We'd like you to help us rebuild the company culture Victoria destroyed." I looked at the folder, then out the window. Months earlier, I would have accepted without hesitation. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I smiled. "Thank you." Daniel waited. "But I'm not coming back as the woman who was afraid to speak. If I come back, it'll be because my voice finally matters." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Months later, I walked back through those same office doors. Not as the woman everyone pitied, not as the assistant everyone overlooked, but as someone who had learned the most valuable lesson of her life. Money can buy power. Power can buy silence, but neither can buy loyalty, neither can buy integrity, and neither can steal a marriage built on respect. Victoria thought she was competing with me. She never was. She was competing with the quiet life Jake and I had built together, one honest day at a time. And that's a life no billionaire can purchase. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more emotional stories of love, betrayal, resilience, and second chances.